So much of this has been made while I've known both of you over the past year, and I feel very invested in all of it. I've watched you guys transform your practice as two mothers who have very limited time. The fact that you've been able to put together this show in a very short amount of time is incredible. So
Thank you.
happy we get to celebrate. But I have questions here. So the first one is for you, Rebecca. What's with the birds?
What's with the birds? There's a couple of different reasons with the birds, and I will start off by saying when I'm going to speak about them, I'm speaking very much in generalities because each bird is very specific. They have very specific traits and personalities, and I tend to use that a lot in my work, but in general, I really love the concept of the crazy bird person. There's this level of that's just a thing that I feel like everybody has heard, right? And it's almost a judgment, but at the same time,
It's associated with
Right.
eccentricity, you know?
yeah. But it's also at the same time, birds are beautiful. Why not love them, and why not be interested in them? But in depth, in a lot of these paintings specifically, I'm referencing birds that are specific to being good parents and or struggling with loss of identity and or death of identity, and what that can create within parenting and the kind of relationship that can create with your children.
Well, I think you process a lot through the symbols that you use in your work. I think it's all, for both of you, super personal. So I like that you found these symbols that I think other people can have questions about, but for you have very strong, deep ties to your childhood, but also can be read just by the traits of the animals that you're representing.
Yeah.
For Samantha.
Do you like how I wrote these questions?
What word?
That's fencing.
Okay. Okay, there's the E. Yep, I see it now. Looks like a U.
It's fencing.
What is the fencing or dahlias representing in the show for you?
So when we were coming up with the title for the show, kind of brainstorming some different things, and we like the title Enclosure. I love how enclosures can represent a space that can keep you safe. So put our fencing up to kind of keep us safe from anything outside, but also it can become a barrier. We can't get out of our space that we created. So I liked how the word enclosures kind of represented that. And then I had done a piece, this one is the oldest one that I did the end of last year. And it's called White Picket Fence. And to me, the white picket fence is just the ideal life of a wife and mother, to have that kind of feeling of safety, something for your garden to be protected by. So it was coming from a positive place, the fencing was coming from a positive place. And originally I wanted to name the show Chosen Enclosures, because I was well, we choose our own spaces. But then Rebecca is coming from a different kind of angle where we don't always choose, our situations that we're in. And that made sense to me too. So kind of coming at it from different sides, but yeah, so that's why this white picket fencing just kind of represents the ideal, and also the thought of the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. And I think that's a really common theme with motherhood too, because we see all the other moms and their perfect lives. We're well, they don't feed their kids chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. They must be doing it better. But
well, there's a symbol keeping up with the Joneses a little bit, I feel with the white picket fence, and I feel that's definitely tied to some mom guilt.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, just kind of that ideal life, but also something that's sometimes just not attainable as well, and being okay with that.
Because there's a lot of chaos that you're representing in your work as well.
Yes, yeah, a controlled chaos.
Yeah.
those are his marks that he painted on. And it originally came from like an accident because I was painting in the dining room. That was like my space at the time. And he would like sneak and like try and paint on my paintings because he saw me painting and he loves me. And like it was from a place of love, not like, haha, I'm gonna paint on your stuff and mess it up. And so it was endearing, but also like anxiety, anxiety too.
So it's like a pretty intense process.
Yes.
So
yeah.
like this isn't like a small like, well, it just took me an hour, so it's okay to paint that.
Right. It's like underpainting with like layers and layers of glazing and very kind of like tight controlled painting. And I was inspired by how he was just like, yeah, I'm gonna make all these marks. So I enjoyed watching that process too. So it's kind of evolving into like a future series of like the still lives of like perfectly clean spaces, and then just being okay with the chaos that is going to happen with a toddler. So
yeah, that like loss of control, I feel like is a hard thing for all of us to navigate.
Yeah.
There's like always kind of the tension between like what we can control and what we cannot. I think that both of you have kind of represented some of those themes here as well. But I'm curious, because Rebecca, you're the one that was kind of seeing this proposal as a way to bring your and Samantha's art together. And I'm curious, like, what inspired that? Why Samantha's art? What were you trying to communicate by bringing both of your work into a space?
There's a couple of reasons that I really love, and I'll start thematically. It's been very interesting working with Samantha because I feel like we reach a point every couple of weeks where we go, well, I'm thinking about this, and we go, well, I'm thinking about this too. And then at the same time, it looks so different on the actual piece. We're considering some of the same things. We're considering motherhood. We're considering this concept of enclosure, but I'm considering it from the perspective of I never wanted the idealized life. I didn't want the white picket fence. It is a struggle for me to resign myself to being what feels like just a mom. And so I fight very much with the concept of identity in that sense, and with the identities that I've carried before me and the identities that I continue to carry into parenthood. And like watching Samantha wrestle with motherhood in the sense where she's like struggling with certain things in it, but she also loves this. She loves the idea of being a mom. And it's also been interesting watching some of that like transform into new ideas for you as well. So thematically, I think our work pretty quickly started to make sense together, and I was really excited to see that almost happen naturally throughout the process of doing the show and creating all of these pieces. And then aesthetically, I love seeing our work next to each other, and I've said this a couple of times tonight. When I end up in a room with a lot of very loose, very impressionist or abstract painters, I am usually the most realistic painter in the room. When I'm in a room with Samantha, I'm the least realistic painter in the room. And it's a very cool thing to see these things juxtaposed, because we kind of get to learn the parts of our art that maybe we don't always accept or notice, and I love seeing those things.
So I think you can see your voice, right? And I think so much of, I don't know, when I talk to painters, I feel like so much of their voice are the things that they end up seeing is like, well, that's not quite right. Right? It's like within all of those like inconsistencies is where like ultimately your style is derived from. And I think it's really nice to be able to see that here. And I think it's interesting too, because you don't always get to see two portrait artists working in like a sort of similar manner as far as like the themes that you're drawing on be represented in a space where it's not divided in any way, like we're able to look at them freely together and
Mixing them together. I mean, we talked about it. Putting these pieces next to each other as opposed to separating them from one another was so important. Yeah, and it's been very cool to watch us grow in similar ways, right? Both of our work has taken on a more imaginative tone to it in a way that neither one of us were even considering when we started the show. And that's new for both of us, and that's an experience we get to kind of like the path we get to start walking
Yeah, it's wonderful seeing all the pieces together in like one area and seeing how like just the growth of like, okay, I did this one last year and then this one happened and this one happened. And even today, like we were setting up and we were just talking the whole time about like future plans, like, oh, I want to do this next, and like, yeah, that's something I want to do with that too. Um, Still like exploring ideas of motherhood, but I'm interested in exploring the idea of like connections as well. So like connections within our family and not just like me and my child, because I feel like I've kind of shown that like wanting to move on to some other things. So if anything, just like seeing all the work together, it's inspired me to like kind of reach for some different topics and kind of push myself in other ways, but it's also just so great, like seeing all of our work together. And because I went 2 years without touching a paintbrush. Throughout my pregnancy, it was a terrible pregnancy, and I was sick. I threw up every day. I shouldn't have said that. I don't know why I said that, but you didn't need to know that. But just like the smell of turpentine, I was not going to be able to like make a painting while I was like physically ill. And then just like some postpartum depression and just, anxieties and stuff. So I didn't pick up a paintbrush.
I think it's okay too to like.
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
time, like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you're
I wasn't
allowed
like
to.
hard on myself,
Yeah.
and then I did this painting here, and then it just something like clicked, and all of a sudden I'm just like painting all the time, and thinking about like new shows and things like that. So this is my first show where I've had like all of my work together. I've had pieces like in other exhibits, but it's wonderful to have like my first show with you, Rebecca, and like see all the pieces together and just seeing what we're capable of as
Yeah.
well.
That was really cool. You never know what you can do until you have a two month
Deadline, yeah.
Really
Yeah.
quick, man.
Well, I think it's a beautiful show.
Thank
I
you.
think that you guys should be very proud of yourselves, and I hope that everyone here has gotten a lot out of this experience as well, doing the work today together. But I'm curious if anyone in the audience has any questions for the artists.
So, that's a pretty fast turnaround. Do you use elephants to drag for your oil paints?
I use a lot of liquid. Like I joke that I would like drink my liquid, like if I could, and it dries pretty quickly. I also work really thin layers, lots of glazing and layers like that. So it does dry pretty fast for my turnaround time. And then I just usually work on like a couple things at a time, so I can have something drying and then be doing another layer of something else. So, but yeah, it luckily dries pretty fast with that.
And you started this body of work, what, like last Feb?
Yeah, it's been about a year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This one here was
yeah,
the beginning after you had done
yeah.
that.
This one, and then went to that one there, and just kind of took off from there. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's it.
We've asked Rebecca about her deal with the birds. What is the meaning behind the birds in the first one you painted?
Yeah, so I also use specific types of birds for symbolism, and these are storks. And at the time, I was struggling with the idea of if I wanted to have more children, because my pregnancy was so difficult and my birth was so difficult, and I'm older, so just things like that. So I had asked my husband, he's gonna love this, but asked him to get a vasectomy, and and I was having it was the day of, and I had been asking him to get this forever, like, come on. And then it was the day of, and I'm like, oh, do I really want that though? So it was kind of like, do I want this or do I not want this? So I kind of wanted these storks to just be like coming, but bringing no babies. Also me kind of like, oh gosh, like, please no. So that was the idea behind the storks here. And then I also have, it's very small, in the back of, this is my stepdaughter, Lula. Yeah, it's very small, and I didn't want it to pull focus or even like be noticed unless you knew it was there. But there's a painting of birds in the background, and that's a specific bird called a cowbird and a reed warbler. And cowbirds will lay their eggs in other birds' nests, and they're called like a parasitic.
I was gonna say if you want, because
Yeah.
they're also
She knows
in,
all this history.
No, it's also in mine as well.
Yeah.
The painting with both of the bluebirds also has a cowbird sitting on the back of the chair.
Yeah, so they lay the birds in
Very
other birds' nests, and then the reed warbler, which is tiny, ends up raising the cowbird's baby, which is massive. So they're like feeding this giant baby. So that's Lula, my giant baby. But the idea of like raising someone else's child and loving it as if it were my own, because the reed warblers don't even realize that they're taking care of another baby. And that's how I feel with Lula. So I wanted to show that connection there. So again, you wouldn't even know, like, but I know it's there. So it's symbolism that doesn't even really need to be understood by everyone, but it's the choice that I made to put in there. So those are my birds. Oh, Esther, you asked that one. Yeah.
Rebecca, could you tell us about this piece, Grief, please? And just your process and,
The grief.
yes.
So just as a little bit of an understanding of who I am is I have ties to cemeteries because I have family members from forever ago who were caretakers for a cemetery. I feel very, very comforted in them. And I've also been to many a funeral. And in that piece, I was kind of referencing that simultaneous comfort and within the concept of, grief. And then my daughter is in that as kind of a representation of who I was as a child, where I wasn't necessarily within the space of like quote unquote grief. I was outside in my own space, and it was actually where I was probably happiest at the time. And then process-wise, that's a really cool piece because there's silk paper from Vietnam, which is also very, very special to me, covering the entire canvas and overlaid on the top of the piece is copper foil in Art Nouveau marigolds, and marigolds have their own level of symbolism to it. But there's quite a lot to that process, and it did actually take me a very long time too.
So did you paint around the print image?
The marigolds.
Yes.
The marigolds I almost treated as a stamp to the very end, and I put the leaf on top of that stamped element. And I did occasionally put paint where I wanted to touch things up, but otherwise it was essentially a stamp on top.
Cool.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Also for Rebecca, I've noticed in some of your works you can see a little bit of the underlayer still shining through them, and I noticed you use different, like you're using different colors for them. Like you've got the really vivid magenta over here, you've got the kind of richer like terracotta color for behind this one. What's kind of your thought process behind that, and like letting the marks show through?
Yeah, it's interesting because Samantha called me out tonight for like not necessarily doing it as much in my newer paintings, which I may have to pull back again and readjust. I try really hard to pick a color that is very contrasted to what the tone of the entire piece is going to be. So it is something that is supposed to stand out a little bit. And I think for me, that's essentially a reference to the earliest art that I ever did, which was all line work, because I liked pens. I like pen and ink. I love lines. And I knew that I didn't want to use the kind of black, dark line work in my pieces when I started getting deeper into realistic painting, but I still missed the element of like, it's almost like a disconnect from one section to another that I really enjoy, and it's just enjoyable for me to look at it. So I tried to treat the underpainting as like the line work for the outside of the painting. And I
Did
should.
you have a question?
Oh, yeah, just I've been thinking about this, like, you as the artist are making this work to process certain emotions and, like, process presumably the things that are going on in your lives, and, like almost, it's like a storytelling medium. So, like, how do you, like, bridge that, like, between, like, how you want it to be viewed and like how you're processing the emotions, and like what is the message that you want your audience to walk away with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've been thinking about that recently too, because I'm really drawn to beautiful images, like pretty images, but I like kind of the traumatic undertone to them. So I want to represent maybe something that's not as pretty in a pretty way, if that makes sense. And also, I think that like trauma and beauty kind of live together as well. And I think about like my childbirthing story and how that was so traumatic, but then I got the best thing that's ever happened to me out of it. So that's like the Dahlia still life back here. It has it's called After the Cutting, and it has the surgical scissors, and then there's epidural needles like in the flowers. So it's probably one of the most traumatic things that's ever happened to me, but I would do it 100 times again for my son. So representing that in like a beautiful kind of way. So telling those stories of trauma or even just like hardships and these like domestic kind of stories and daily stresses, but representing them in more of a beautiful manner is what speaks to me.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I think it's been interesting because throughout the process of creating the works for this show, my thoughts on that have changed. Whereas I think I kind of approached it a little bit more like Samantha for a while. I've started trying to let go of the expectation of what people see when they're looking at my piece. It doesn't mean that I'm not coming in with motifs and with metaphors, and that's part of who I am, but I have worked for so long in a way that expects universality in what I'm creating that it's almost like eaten away at my ability to make work that speaks to me. And I've started realizing that I really want to get incredibly introspective. Like I plan to get selfish, and I'm hoping that within that deep introspection, without the expectation of everybody understanding what that like trauma really is, there are people who will see something that clicks for them as well. And they get to put themselves within that position without me necessarily having to force it or hand it on a platter. Because that's also just not fair to viewers. They deserve more trust than that. Yeah, it's a great answer.
Samantha, that piece there is just absolutely gorgeous along there.
Thank you.
Can you talk about the fabric? Painting that fabric.
Yeah, so pretty.
I'm trying to remember what the fabric looks like.
There's like the
Yeah,
Afghan,
yeah.
your dress.
I wanted to, like challenge myself with kind of filling the space with pattern and texture. I really like the idea of like a hand knit item, which is like the hand knit blanket was my son's baby blanket in the drawing, and there's some other like comes up with knit items of otherwhere somewhere else in the paintings, but yeah, for that one it takes place in my dining room because at the time my studio was in the dining room because my studio space became the nursery. So I was painting in the dining room and I had baby gates around me and there was toys everywhere and Miss Rachel and Cocomelon was like playing in the other room. And I just had this thought of like, I want to see mother artists in their spaces. So I want to see what these mother artists are creating and what's happening with kind of outside the space. But I thought just being represented as a mother artist would be awesome. So wanted to hold my son and also be like creating the painting of holding my son. And then I've told it a couple of times, but sometimes I don't have a finished plan for my painting when I'm starting, and it kind of like happens as I'm painting, and I didn't know what I was going to paint outside the window. I knew I wanted some sort of symbolism. I was probably going to put a white picket fence outside the window because like that's what happens, but I hadn't decided yet. And I was painting there, and all of a sudden the tornado sirens went off, like in real life. And Alex was like, "We have to go in the basement." I was like, "Dang it, like I'm in the zone." But we had to go down the basement, and we were all down there, like on a mattress, like the whole family. And I was just thinking, like, a tornado is the perfect representative of like what it's like to paint in this like crazy world that we're living in, like what it means to be an artist in this like political climate, but also what it's like to paint in my physical house with this tornado like running around me all the time. So I'm like, that's it. It's got to be a tornado. So that's like inspired that painting, which seems to happen quite a lot. Like I'll be struggling with like, what do I do in this area? And then it just something happens and it like clicks and it's like, oh, well that's obvious. It's got to be that. So just kind of paying attention to life around you, I think kind of helps guide the painting along. Sometimes life is telling you where the painting needs to go. You just have to listen to it.
Such good questions.
I know. Any other questions? Feeling like I'm at school. Like, did you do the reading? I will give you a pop quiz if I have to.
I have one last question. Because I think for people looking at your work, Samantha, you don't necessarily look like a rule breaker. But you are, right? Because your
I am.
process, you told me that you're a rule breaker because you treat your paint sort of like watercolors.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
the way that you're layering things, it's not
Yeah.
the typical oil application. Curious if you can talk about that process a little bit.
I do like my process does draw from like the old masters. Like I love how they would do their like grisaille method, like underpainting and like a burnt umber. But I do remember in like graduate school life painting, I would be painting with like just a turpentine wash, and my professor was like, this is watercolor," and then he picked up my brush and he's like, "It's like painting with a tongue," because like I use watercolor brushes. And he would, tell me like, "I want to see the paint and all that stuff," and that's just not how I do it. And I am starting to lean more in towards like to that at the end of my painting. Like I do like to see a little bit of three-dimensionality, like in the paint, like feeling that like juicy texture. Like I do love that. So I've been making myself like put it in at the end, and I make like a sound effect, like boop. Okay, okay, that's good. But the whole process is just like very thin washes of glazes, and I'll have the entire painting, besides some elements, like the tornado was missing, and but I do a whole like value painting first, and I make sure like everything's working.
So black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I use like burnt umber, so it's like
Okay.
slightly brown.
Sure.
And then I make washes and I put that on there. And I just love the transparency that you can get, like in the skin tones, because there are multiple layers of paint going on in that space. So I guess that is a little bit of a rule breaker. Like me? No.
Had to call you out.
Yeah.
Is that inspired at all by your work with ceramics?
What do you mean?
Like glazing, like working with glaze and
Oh.
that kind of three-dimensionality and like
New thoughts.
New thoughts, yeah. I don't know, because ceramics are so different. You put something on there and then you say a prayer to the ceramics guy when you bake it in the kiln, and you're like, "Please don't be broken." And then you look at it and it's a surprise. Like the glaze is like melting, and so that I feel like is a bit more
it's
spontaneous.
completely different, yeah.
Yeah, but I wish it'd be nice if like painting had that element to it of like.
What's gonna happen?
What's gonna happen? But that honestly does happen when I do the paintings of Tristan, because I don't know what he's gonna do.
Yeah.
Like, what's gonna happen? And I stand there like this, like, oh god. And then Haley's standing there, and I'm like, "Do you think it's done?" And she's like, "No, give him a bigger brush." I'm like, "No, I think this is fine. This one's fine." So yeah, I guess that does like kind of go across different mediums as well. Yeah. Yeah.
A question for Rebecca, kind of jumping off of that question on materials. I didn't realize at first that you were working in acrylics because the rendering is so detailed and dimensional, and you oftentimes get that more with the layering of oils. What draws you to acrylics as your medium of choice, and is that always your medium of choice, or just for this body of work?
I guess I have three main thoughts. One, she has pulled me a little bit over to the dark side. I have been using a lot of glazing medium in my acrylics lately, and I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing right now? I've also been really enjoying that. Two, acrylics actually was never my first medium ever. I dropped out of school, so I didn't really have too many years of a formal art education, but I got
Dropped out of art school, not like high school.
No. I wasn't technically declared of anything at that point. I just said,
Make that clear,
I'm out. All right, yeah, I got like two years and a semester of not doing what I was supposed to do into college. But I was very good at drawing, and so I spent a lot of time doing pastels, and I was really terrified of paint just from the get-go, even though I was really, really good at painting for scenic design because I was a theater person and I was going to be a scenic designer. But like real acrylic paint in a tube scared the ever-loving daylights out of me. And I think at the very end, what landed me on acrylics and what keeps me with acrylics is a bit of a mix of like stubbornness and like finally feeling competent. Partially it's stubbornness because I know I probably could learn oils, especially if I asked, and I really don't want to go all the way back to the beginning right now. And then the competence is that like the years of all of the different mediums that I use, the pastels, and then learning how to do things in scenic design, like those actually laid the foundations for me to be able to do acrylics really well from the beginning. Like I understood how to mix the colors together, and I started to feel really comfortable really fast. And so I love it because basically if I can keep expanding on that, you can make it do almost anything. I can add the glazing and like get those transparencies with oil, but I'm not waiting for dry time. And I feel really excited about seeing more and more about what it can do. So I'm comfortable with the stubbornness because it's growth within a space of competence, which is good.
Also, it's a really beautiful, like opaque feeling.
Yeah, and
Like,
you
the
can even,
acrylic
I mean,
is-
we see it in the differences between
Yeah.
the paintings where it's
like mine, I will like overly varnish. I want to
Glossy.
see my face in the reflection and see all the glares. And then yours, it's just like, oh, she just put like the block of that color in, and it's so beautifully done.
love shapes.
But I can like scrape off paint on my palette from 2 weeks ago, and I can still use it today.
But I have a takeout container that I put all of my paint in, and it
Okay.
stays just fine.
That's fair.
But yeah, and I will say, I do really love the matte finish, and I push that to the extent that my varnish is matte varnish. I do not use a gloss varnish. I don't want to take away from what the paint is in and of itself. I like seeing it look finished the way that it was when it was sitting on the easel. I feel very good about that.
Well, thank you guys for the insight into your process and work and helping us see deeper into some of the specific paintings and the metaphors that you're using. Big thank you to 106 Gallery, Zachary.
Which is something I will never do. No show in the wintertime.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.